exclusively on Secular Media Network. This is the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Hello and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I am your host, Callie Wright, here actually in person with my co-host, Ari Stillman. Hi, Ari.
I'm in full HD glory.
No, I didn't get the HD lenses on my glasses, so you're really closer to SD.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. That could have turned into a sexual joke. I thought you were going to go there.
What? How?
Think about the initials, SD.
Oh, I'm a little bit too innocent, I guess, for this kind of humor.
So, are you still not getting it?
Yeah, I get it.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay. All right. No, I was just making sure. Okay, so we are hanging out here at the American Humanist Association 75th anniversary conference. It's been a cool event. Lots of good people here. Lots of great talks, great speeches, and panels, and that kind of thing. So what I wanted to kind of talk about in this first segment, we're going to have Sincere, who is the social justice coordinator for the American Humanist Association, on a little bit later.
AKA the official SJW.
Right, like the head SJW. Like, yeah, Chief SJW. Sweet. I'm really excited.
That would be so awesome if you could actually get a position called social justice warrior and get paid for it.
I'm going to go ahead and suggest to the AHA that they need to make that change. So in my mind, conferences are about two things. Conferences are about family and community, and conferences are about activism. Because I think
three things, Callie. This is why she usually has me in another state.
Yes, where I can't reach out and physically harm you. Good God. Anyways.
Try not to interrupt so much. I'm so excited. About activism.
There's been some drama in the atheist movement lately. And, there are people who have been on pedestals and people who have been, folks who are big names in the movement who, it's come out that they've been dishonest and have, kind of taken advantage of people and just done some generally pretty awful things. And, yeah, well, there's pretty definitive evidence of at least one of the things. But, in my mind, I'm not sure that really changes anything. I've seen a lot of people say that, they want to leave the movement, that they think, no one in the movement can be trusted, or, that this activism isn't worth it anymore, or, it's not worth dealing with all of that. And that makes me really sad. Like, it legitimately hurts to see that, because obviously, we want to root out corruption. We want to root out dishonesty. We want to have integrity, and we want to hold people accountable when they do things they're not supposed to do. But we also have to remember why we do this in the first place. Why we do this in the first place, at least in my mind, why I do this, and I'm sure why Ari does this. It's not to make, stinging points against someone in a debate and like feel super good about yourself for telling somebody how silly they are.
It's to make money.
Right.
That's why I do it.
Oh, that's the other drama of he who will not be named.
That's another topic for another time.
But the fact is, people are still hurting. There are people who are questioning their religious identity, and they need help, and they need community. They need people to talk to. They need organizations to get resources and support. Those things are necessary. And I don't think it's mutually exclusive to say that, we need to keep this community alive and we need to do what's best for the community, and saying that we need to be ruthless about rooting out corruption. I think those things can coexist. So, what I kind of wanted to talk about here in the first segment is why, why that stuff is still important. So, one of the organizations at the heart of this whole thing, and I mean, it's out in public, we're not revealing anything secret here, is Recovering from Religion. And from everything that I can see, there might have been one or two individuals on the board who may not have done things exactly right, but the intentions were good and there was no maliciousness. And they've been basically completely transparent about the entire situation. They document dumped JT Eberhard and gave him basically access to everything and said, here's what it is. If you find evidence of wrongdoing, we want to know about it. And the other parties involved are not being so forthcoming. And what recovering from religion does, in my mind, is incredibly important. It's vitally important. I mean, it's life-saving stuff. I've heard talks from people talking about their hotline project where they literally hear back, someone calls in and they're despondent. They're, God doesn't make any sense to them anymore, and they're dealing with trauma because of their family, or because they're a veteran and they have PTSD, or they have depression that's been treated by quote unquote treated by clinicians and psychologists with a religious agenda that doesn't resonate with that person, and they're ready to end it, and they call the hotline project and they don't, and you hear back from these people a couple of days later, you guys saved my life. This is vital work. So I reached out to Darrell Ray. Dr. Darrell Ray is the host of the Secular Sexuality podcast and the founder of Recovering from Religion. Unfortunately, didn't have time to actually come on the show, but I thought it would be important to get his perspective on why this activism is important. So he was kind enough to send us an audio clip of why he thinks this activism is still important. So I'm going to play this now. This is Dr. Darrell Ray. He's the founder of Recovering from Religion, on why he thinks this kind of activism is still important.
Thanks, Callie, for asking me to talk to you about why activism is important. Let me begin by reading a poem I first learned way back in college, and I think it says a lot about why activism is important. This is John Donne's famous poem. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manner of thy friends, or thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. I've been an activist in one way or the other since I was like 16 years of age, when I was protesting the Vietnam War, and shortly after that protesting civil rights. And I was also an activist within my religious community against the racism in my own church. But as I grew and learned about activism and what it meant, and actually learned from some of the best, Bill Barnes, an actual minister, very liberal Christian Methodist minister in Nashville, Tennessee, taught me a lot about activism when I was in seminary. I know it sounds like an odd place to learn, but he was the one that first turned me on to Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, which I read with great interest and have used his writings and concepts pretty much my entire adult life. But why am I an activist? I look around the world and I see the world as a network, almost like a spider web, with many different strands coming to and through me. And I look at that world and I say, I can't possibly pull all those strands. I'm one person. I don't have enough brain cells in my head to understand and pull them all. So I have to husband my energy and my focus. I have to find where I think my energies are best used. I cannot ignore the rest of the world. I know there are people out there that feel like they can live a life ignoring the rest of the world. I think they're badly mistaken. I think they're putting the world at risk, their grandkids at risk, their neighbors at risk, when you don't look around and see how you can help the world, how you can maintain and advance the world that we have today. So when I look at the world, I think, where's the place I can pull the string the hardest and bring the greatest justice? Well, I've concluded in my life it's religion. I think religion is one of the most insidious forces on the planet, and I think I have skills and talents to work in that area. But I can't divorce that from the fact that racism, income inequality, LGBT rights are all influenced by this religious dogma, among other things. So I put my energy into dealing with religion, but I also pull a few strings and support my LGBT friends, for example. And I'm certainly very cognizant and supportive of people who are fighting institutional racism in our society. When you look around the world and you say, I can ignore the world and live my own life, quite frankly, I see that as a parasitic approach. You're living off the benefits that somebody else brought to you. If you, for example, hate paying sales taxes or hate paying your taxes for your property, you're failing to realize that somebody before you paid those taxes. Somebody before you put those taxes in a coffer that went to build the school and pay the teachers that educated you. I see too many people basically saying, I got what I need, I'm pulling up the ladder and I'm not supporting anybody else. I don't want to give my money to something because I want to keep it all myself. It's really a parasitic way to live. Well, I'm sorry if that sounds harsh. When you don't recognize that each of us is a part of the main, a part of the continent, and if anyone tries to live as a parasite, as somebody who doesn't contribute to this society, then that diminishes us all, just like John Donne said. So John Donne's poem has been kind of my mantra for many years. I think John Donne brought to the fore what we all need to learn, and that is we're connected to everybody else in some way, shape, or form. If there's income inequality on this planet, it may be related to the fact that I haven't voted for somebody that would help to correct income inequality. If there is racism, institutional racism, it may be partly because I haven't stood up and challenged those who support institutional racism. If there's LGBT persecution, it may be in part because I haven't stood up and challenged the authorities that allow that to continue. If there's prayer in schools, if there's teachers coercing children into religious stances and persecuting children because they don't believe in God or something like that, all those are things I take a stand on. Now, some people think I'm an atheist activist. That's not quite true. I am an atheist and I'm an activist, but I've chosen to put my chips into the religion challenging pile. And that's why I started recovering from religion. And it's why I support the Secular Therapy Project. I started that several years ago. It's why I wrote The God Virus and Sex and God, and why I do the podcast, Secular Sexuality. And it's why I think people need to understand the impact of religion on their lives. I am very much in favor of atheist activism. I think Dave Silverman's doing a great job. I think Dan Barker does a great job. But that's their thing, and that's where their focus is. I support those people. I support what they're trying to do. It's not my clear and main focus. And I have a lot of respect for people who identify what their clear and main focus is and then put their energy in that spot, while continuing to support other people in that network of life that all interacts to support or destroy what is human in our society. Some people just aren't cut out to be an in-your-face kind of activist, but that doesn't mean you can't be an activist. You're an activist when you write a check to a cause that you think can make a difference. You're an activist if you volunteer for our hotline, for example, and you talk to people who are trying to get out of religion. You're an activist if you start a small group discussion in your area, or a science book study club, or any number of other things. Or if you simply support legislation by writing to your legislator and say, I support this or I'm against this, that could help or harm people in our community or in our allied communities. All those things are activism. So don't feel like you have to be the in-your-face activist, although I think we need more of those. But the more activists we have at every level, the better. Thanks, Callie. I hope this answers your question a little bit. I appreciate the opportunity.
God, I love Daryl Ray. He's awesome. And I mean, I think that's all good stuff. That's all valid. It's about people for me.
Right.
You know, we talk about the drama, and this is, something that I was talking about with a couple of friends of mine last night that I was staying with, is that, sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in, like, refining your arguments and making, stinging points against the people that you disagree with, and in the mechanics of that kind of stuff. And it's really easy to kind of very slowly lose sight of the reason that we do these things in the first place. And what I've kind of done in this, I mean, it may sound cheesy, but it's something that I think has really kind of guided me, is I've kind of made just like a personal mission statement for myself. And that is, I want hurt people to stop hurting. And yeah, and I mean, it sounds cheesy, but that's legit. Like if I really think about it, when I really drill it down to its core, what is this show about? Why, do I travel to conferences and give talks? Why do I spend time talking to people on Facebook and responding to emails and all that kind of stuff? And that's really what it comes down to, is I want, I've been given incredible gifts by the people in my life that have allowed me to do the things that I've done and to be happy and to live a life that I feel is worthwhile and that I feel, I'm doing something. And it's incredible. And I want other people to be able to have those things. So, in my mind, there may be bad things happening in the movement as it's established, and those things need to be addressed. But I don't think any of that changes the reason that we're here.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ari?
Well, I mean, I definitely understand.
It was like a big 10-minute long rant for me. Like, okay, Ari can talk. Ari can say words. Yeah, I do that a lot, don't I?
You're a chatty one. I definitely understand why people feel upset and betrayed by a lot of the things that have been happening recently in the atheist community. But,
well, and I do.
Yeah.
I'll just name names because it's out there. I was a person who very, very much had Sarah Moorhead on a pedestal. I make a conscious effort not to put people on pedestals, but just from the outside, it looked like that is like literally the ultimate activisting badass, like working super hard to make things happen for the movement and to do good things for people. And it's like, I look at a person like that and I think that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. So it was like, if I could be, if I could say that I have a hero, it would have been her. So, it was, I didn't know her personally. We only ever had very minimal conversation, but I still kind of felt betrayed.
Yeah, and that's definitely fine to have people that you look up to and people you admire and people that you aspire to want to be like and to achieve, similar things that they do. But the difference between us and religious folks is that those people are humans. They are not, they're not receiving messages directly from the creator of the universe who knows everything and has, a plan in mind. They're just human beings. So even if they do a lot of good things, a lot of times they also don't do such good things because they're humans.
Well, right.
Yeah, and that's something that Dr. Ray touched on a little bit in his message that he recorded, is that if we want things to be better in the world, there's no afterlife. There's nothing after this. So things are not going to get better unless we actually try and do something about it. And if you don't care enough to make things better, you do you. I don't understand that kind of perspective personally, but if you're happy with that, that's fine. Personally, I'm not happy with that, and that's why I try and do as much as I can.
Well, I think it comes down to the idea that human beings are social creatures, right? There are some people who are honestly misanthropic, who don't really care about, being around people or community or anything like that. And if that's truly
how
who
I pretend to be,
right? And if that's truly
that's just
who
to mask that
right.
I care too much.
Yeah, and if that's truly who you are, that's fine. I don't have any interest in telling people how they should be or anything like that, but I would venture to, I would say it's safe to say that most people do crave some sort of community, some sort of, relationships with other people. And, the idea of us all being interconnected and, and our fates are largely intertwined, that's valid. When we help everyone in society, we all do better, so it's not even entirely selfless. If other people in society are doing better, I think we all do better. It's a matter of, just of compassion and saying, these people simply, deserve to be treated with respect and deserve to be treated with equality, just, by virtue of the fact that they exist with, no other qualifiers attached.
Which is very fitting since we're at the American Humanist Association conference.
Right, exactly.
That's what humanism is about.
And, but at the same time, it's not even entirely selfless because, building community, I think it makes us all stronger. So we want to connect and we want to commiserate about the things that we have in common, especially, axes of oppression that we have in common. We're all non-religious people in a climate that's not the friendliest about that. It's, the U.S. is definitely not the worst place to be an atheist by far, but it's still,
at least you're not in Pakistan
right,
or Saudi Arabia.
In certain places, the climate is still pretty hostile,
Yeah.
And I don't think it's wrong to congregate around that idea And to even, drill things down more specifically and say that, because we care about evidence, because we care about the facts, we understand that, that we should be accepting of LGBT people, regardless of where they identify on a gender or sexuality spectrum, that racial differences shouldn't matter. Obviously, we live in a society where they do, and that has to be addressed. But at the end of the day, like, we really should be treating each other as if we're simply just human. And, we can drill down into specifics and say, we've identified these specific groups who experience oppression, disproportionately, and that's why there are initiatives surrounding LGBT rights, surrounding racial justice, surrounding feminism. It all just makes sense to me. I mean, in my mind, the word humanism is an umbrella term, almost kind of analogous to the way that transgender is an umbrella term, right? Transgender is an umbrella term that can mean a whole bunch of different things. And I think humanism is the same way. The people who are in, we're going to get into this with Sincere in a little bit, so I don't want to spoil the entire conversation. But, for me, it's the idea that, if people are what we care about, I think we can and should identify if there are certain groups of people who are being oppressed for a specific reason and experiencing that oppression disproportionately, then I don't think it's wrong to create specific initiatives to directly address those problems, like racial justice, like women's rights, and LGBT equality. So it just all makes sense to me that those things, and then I think the other thing, just speaking about the human side of things for a second, I think of the emails that I get and the Facebook messages that I get from people who are in tough positions. I think about a young person who created a fake Facebook account just so they could reach out to me because they didn't feel safe where they were and they don't feel like they can talk to anyone where they are. I think about someone who wrote to me to say that they didn't feel safe even in their trans community because of there was a certain specific thing about this person that other people weren't accepting of. I'm trying hard not to give to give away people's identities and stories. And then I think about someone who said I'm in law school and I've decided that I want to be a civil rights lawyer because of listening to your show.
Nice.
I think about things like that, and it's podcasting, I think, kind of gets a bad rap as sort of a
SJW circle jerk.
Well, right. Well, not even necessarily that, but more like it's an exercise in self-importance and arrogance.
Yeah.
I'm going to put this out there because I think what I have to say is so important. And I'm not going to lie. There's an element of that. And sure, I wouldn't do this if I didn't think I was saying something important. Some people may agree, some people may disagree. That's fine.
Everything that I say. Here, you listen to it.
Right. So, but I think of those people, and I think of those things that we have been told about. Someone, simply saying I don't feel welcome in my local LGBT community because it's so focused on religion.
Yeah, we were just looking at Facebook earlier while we were, getting set up, and there was a post from someone in your local trans group who was proselytizing on Facebook in the trans group. Exactly,
and it bothers me that people aren't sensitive to what that can mean to people. There are people of faith in our community, and I respect that. I don't want to be, in your face, firebrand atheist, tell those people that they're not allowed to believe and they're not allowed to talk about the things they believe. But
your beliefs are wrong and stupid.
There's a way that you approach that. You can say, "Hey, I have this church and it's inclusive. So if that's a thing that sounds like it might mean something to you, let's talk." I just want to make a general announcement that you're welcome here. That this is a welcoming and affirming place. That's awesome. But to get in front of somebody's face, you need to know that God loves you. You need to know that God is love. To someone who was abused as a result of their exit from religion, especially intersecting with the fact that they might have been LGBT or any other reasons, there is a diagnosis specifically of religious trauma syndrome. and there are people in our community who experience that. I mean, if the message is, I'm going to say these things, and if this means something to you, then awesome. It was very much, this is how it is, this is who God is, this is what God means, that kind of stuff, like, that, that begins to sound very much like all of the things that these people's abusers said to them in the course of abusing them. And it makes me so angry that people are so oblivious to that. And it's not malicious.
No.
That's the thing. It's not malicious. These people aren't being mean. They think they're being compassionate.
Yeah, they think that this is what people need to be able to heal and be,
exactly
full humans.
Right.
Whatever that means.
And for some people that may be the case. You know what I mean? For the people that makes sense to, I'm not interested in reaching in and taking that away from them necessarily. I mean, I'll have the conversation about religion with anyone who wants to have it with me, but I'm not going to be the person who's in your face saying, you're stupid for believing in this, you shouldn't believe this way, you should act, I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is having people respect the fact that what makes sense to you as far as spirituality might not make sense to other people. As atheist as I am and as strongly as I feel about the atheist position and about humanism and about secularism, when I enter those spaces, I'm very, very cognizant of the fact that there are people of faith in those spaces that I might hurt by expressing those viewpoints the wrong way. And I don't feel like...
Because you are a human being with compassion.
Well, right. But I don't feel like that courtesy, generally speaking, is given from the religious side of the conversation. And, I mean, I'm one person in a community of one city. So I'm not trying to make a general pronouncement about this is how things are, but I can definitely say that that's an experience I've heard from many, many people about their local communities. So when we talk about intersectionality and when we talk about, the secular movement being natural allies with the LGBT community, I think there are natural allies with other things, but obviously us being queer and trans folks, that's what means probably the most to us. It just kind of boggles my mind that we even have to have the conversation, right? I mean, it was so funny. I gave a talk on Friday at the American Humanist Association conference where we're at here. And one of the questions during the Q&A, it was fantastic. It was an older gentleman, and he walks up to the microphone and he goes, I just don't understand something. And I'm like, oh God, here we go. And he's like, well, the way I see it, you're born the way you're born who you are. People just need to accept you for who you are. And I don't understand why it's such a big deal. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Thanks, guy.
Yeah, awesome. And
that could have gone a completely different direction.
Right. And all I could say to this guy was, you're right. That's how it should be, And I mean, I could probably do like a 3-hour long talk on, why people do think it's a big deal. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things about, the fact that trans people make people uncomfortable because we fly in the face of binary thinking and, that kind of thing.
My favorite thing to do.
Right. And then, and there's, talking about in groups versus out groups and, all that kind of stuff. And that's, there's an explanation for that. But it was just so funny because I was really expecting not what he said. But, more to the point, to so many people, it's not obvious, right? It's not obvious that LGBT people are deserving of respect. It's not obvious that religion harms people. To some people, those things are not self-evident the way that we feel like they should be. So that's why we have to keep having these conversations.
Yeah.
That's why we have to keep doing this activism and doing the work that we do.
I feel like most people in these kind of circles, like the atheist and humanist circles, even if they don't agree with our tactics or with the way that we organize, they do agree with the idea that LGBT people are people and deserve rights. They just, I don't know, they have this weird opposition to like specific LGBT focused groups because I think they feel like maybe that further divides people. I don't know.
No, you're right. And that's a lot of times that is the sentiment, right? The sentiment is, why are we labeling people? Because that can create division. And I think what's lost on those people, and again, obviously it comes back to privilege, right? Because privilege, where privilege exists, blind spots exist. Former co-host of the show, Daniel Wolfsong, he said that quote verbatim. I think it's brilliant because I think that's the perfect description of what privilege is and what it means. The thing is, those divisions already exist.
Yeah.
All we're doing is naming them. You know, if I go to a doctor that's not trans competent and I say, okay, so I'm transgender, I need hormone replacement therapy for physical reasons, for mental reasons, because this is what I need to feel better in my body and to feel better about myself. And the doctor says, "You got a penis, sorry." Me saying back to that person, "But I'm just a human," that doesn't mean shit to him. You know what I mean? It's not an argument. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fact is, these divisions exist because people think that, being trans is a mental illness, being, and that affirming that is the same thing as encouraging a person with an eating disorder to do whatever maladaptive behavior they have. Like, they draw those analogies, and the thing is, if we don't have the specific focus in these conversations, we can't even really have the conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if we can't label those things, we can't even really describe what's happening.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's kind of like the argument against Black Lives Matter. It's like breast cancer matters and no other cancer matters. Like that's not the kind of thing we're saying. Hashtag all cancer matters. Why are you having this run for breast cancer? Why aren't you doing it for all cancers?
Exactly. I think his name's Andrew Chu, I think. The guy he was on Jeopardy and became kind of like a social media personality afterwards. I'm not sure if he originated it, but he's like the Twitter screenshot that I kept seeing around. And it was like, are you going to roll up to a cancer benefit and scream out, "All diseases matter"? Because it's literally that silly.
Yeah.
You can't attitude.
Address issues that are specific to LGBT people or any other group of people if you're not getting specific about it. If you're just like, oh, we're all people and that's that. Yeah, we do agree that we're all people, but specific segments of society are having specific issues at the moment that need to be addressed, which is why we need to get together and address them.
Well, right, and we can't address the fact that someone is homophobic without asking why they're homophobic. You know what I mean? You can't respond to someone saying, "Well, I think being gay is unnatural and I don't like it and it makes me uncomfortable and it's not science because they can't procreate." Like, stuff, you know what I mean? Like you can't just say, "Well, they're just people." That's not an argument. It's one, it's not an argument, and two, it's not going to be convincing. Because in that person's mind, "Well, I never said they're not people."
Yeah, they're just weird people.
You have to dig in and you have to figure out where that underlying attitude comes from. And you have to have names for those concepts to be able to talk about them.
Yes.
Thus, labels. And the reason why I think labels can be important, labels are labels can be a double-edged sword, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because labels can matter for all the reasons that we've been talking about for the last 5 or 10 minutes. It gives a name to concepts and ideas that society may not talk about. I mean, the day that I found the word transgender was one of the happiest days of my life because it let me know that, like, wow, this is actually a thing. This isn't just me being weird or wrong. There's a word for this. There's a definition for this. This actually means something. There are other people like me.
Yeah.
That's the reason that labels matter. But what's problematic is when labels become boxes. Mm-hmm. So I can say I'm transgender, and what that means is I'm a person who doesn't identify with my birth assigned sex. Then when it becomes problematic is when it turns into you're transgender, therefore you have to be X, or therefore you should be X. And those things are problematic. Those things I have a problem with. But they aren't necessary as part of accepting the fact that it's okay to label ourselves if that's something that we choose to do. I don't think that the problematic side of things is a necessary consequence as a result. I think we can very easily have these labels for ourselves. So we take the power back to define ourselves and define who we are. And we can leave it at that. We don't have to build boxes around people and tell them how they should act and how they should be.
Words.
Yeah, Ari gave thumbs up as if
I gave thumbs up.
as if you can see thumbs up on a podcast. Well, we're coming up on 35 minutes or so here, so we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Sincere from the American Humanist Association, their social justice coordinator. We're going to be talking about some of the new initiatives that the AHA is doing surrounding social justice. More Atheist Manifesto right after this.
What's up, everyone? My name is Jamie, and I am with an organization called A Voice for the Innocent. We are a community of support for people who are affected by sexual violence. We are super excited to announce that we have partnered with the Vans Warped Tour to launch the Save Our Scene campaign. It's an initiative to reduce sex crimes in the music industry, and we've been working tirelessly to make sure it's as powerful as it can be. We've written an in-depth training for the bands on the tour to help them better understand the scope of the problem and learn how they can be part of the solution. We've done hours upon hours of research to compile every last resource we can find for people who have experienced sexual violence. We then took these resources, sorted them by location, and created state-specific free literature to hand out to music fans at every date of Warped. On top of that, we will be reaching out to people at every stop to let them know that we are another resource for them, and if they have a story to tell, we have a place where people will listen. This is, quite frankly, the largest project we have ever taken on, and we are extremely excited to have this opportunity, but we need your help. Sending 2 people on tour costs money, not to mention the cost of printing literature for every date on top of all the materials we will need to make our campaign have the largest impact possible. This includes a tent, merchandise bins, dollies, and all the other odds and ends that come with touring and implementing this campaign. We are asking for your donations. Anything you can give will get us closer to our goal of reaching as many people on the tour as possible. To donate or to learn more, visit saveourscene.org. Thank you to everyone who is able to help us in this endeavor. And as always, thank you so much to those of you who have already helped us along the way. Hopefully we will see you out at Warped Tour.
Before we jump back into the show, it's time to thank our patrons. Big shout out this week to David. Thank you all so much for believing in us enough to contribute to us financially and for being a part of this movement. Patrons of the Atheist Manifesto have access to all sorts of cool stuff like a big shout out on the show, premium content, including an audio journal I've decided to keep documenting the more personal stuff I don't dive into on the show, and an exclusive patrons only hangout once a month. If you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/The Manifesto to become a part of this movement and support the show. Thank you. Welcome back to the Atheist Manifesto. We're hanging out here at the American Humanist Association 75th Anniversary Convention in Chicago, Illinois. It's been a fantastic time. So we spent a lot of time in the last segment talking about why activism is important and why, we do the things that we do and why we think it's important in the face of all the drama that's happened in the secular movement. And I think a great manifestation of the pursuit of those activities are the new initiatives of the American Humanist Association, the Black Humanist Alliance, the Feminist Humanist Alliance, the LGBTQ Humanist Alliance. And contrary to popular beliefs, these are not entirely new initiatives. These things have existed. It's more of kind of like a relaunch or a rebrand, and a kind of a reboot. Right. And kind of a relaunch of these initiatives. Because some people are really, really worked up over this, like this is something that's all of a sudden new, which it's very obviously
Where's
not.
The Cis Humanist Alliance? I need that one.
So here to talk about those things, talk about those efforts, and have some fun with our hate mail. Sincere Carabo, the social justice coordinator for the American Humanist Alliance. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Yay.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about you first? Why, what got you involved in activism? What got you involved in these movements specifically?
Well, it started No, I was going to say something profound. No,
I was born in a small town.
Hey, that's my line.
Well, skipping over the whole deconversion conversation, I know people are tired of hearing those type of things. It's basically as Dale McGowan said, where he said, atheism is the first step, humanism is the 1,000 steps that follow. And so what you see is a tendency for people, when they become deconverted, to have that firebrand zeal, to be, oh yeah, as the iconoclast Christopher Hitchens used to say, religion
They're all the
poisons.
same, whatever.
Yeah, he used to say, religion poisons everything. And so you have this mindset of some people who are just so preoccupied with obsessing over reason number 3,270,000 whatever about why they're atheists and why religious hegemony is so evil. And it can be definitely pernicious, and it is insidious, but we have to face the fact that it isn't the only social ill that we have to confront. And so over time...
You mean you don't enjoy sitting around discussing counter-apologetics for days at a time?
I did for the first couple of years, but then afterwards... So there are certain people who, after a period of time, say, okay, yes, all right. They settle down a little bit. It's okay, I'm deconverted, but still... Oh, wait a minute. You mean sexism still exists? Racism still exists? And so on and so forth. You know, you have all these various kinds of discrimination and oppression that affect people, and we can't seriously think that we're going to erase all of those issues by continuing to say the same things we've always been saying about religion and religiosity. We already know about the fact that what they're preaching to us is myths and that they're falsehoods. Okay, we know that, and we can counter issues that relate to separation of church and state, but we also have to directly confront these type of issues that are either directly or imminently impacting everyday life of marginalized groups. And so that's something that I have a passion for, because these things matter. We can talk about religious hegemony as well as talk about various other kinds of marginalization that continue to harm people every single day.
Right, and that's not to, obviously it's not to demean the value of the conversation surrounding religion. Like it's a very important conversation to have, and when I hear people, like I end up kind of in the middle on this, because you hear people who it's like literally all they care about is sitting around talking about how they don't believe in God. And on the other side, it's like, I don't even care about people believing in God, but the thing is, I mean, those conversations are important to people, especially people who come from oppressive religious backgrounds. They need a space where they can discuss those kinds of things, and that's important. So, I obviously we're not making the argument that those things aren't important. I think the idea is just that the super hardcore laser focus on just that thing probably misses the mark a little bit. Would you say that's...
Yes, and I think that speaks more to what my position is. I'll always confront religious bigotry and such, but what you're talking about is what I'm talking about, how there becomes... everything is about narratives. And so when you have mainstream narratives that... when we're talking about mainstream narratives, we're talking about a tendency of the collective to reproduce a routine that centers on similar subjects to the exclusion of other matters. And that's what we're talking about now. With the established feedback loop that normalizes discussions driven by the concerns of majority group representation, which happens to be straight white men.
Right.
There are those of us from other communities that are left wanting. And so that's what we're trying to level out.
Right. And I think it's important to note, too, that I think, there's a big disagreement about whether or not, secular folks should be engaged in interfaith work. And I happen to think that we should be engaged in those conversations as long as we kind of agree at the core about other things. I don't think there's a reason that, if there is a church who is actually LGBTQ affirming and has the right attitudes about that, I don't see why we have to shun them completely from the conversation, because at the end of the day, the goal is to keep people alive and to make people's lives better. And I think a secular viewpoint is the viewpoint that's most conducive to that attitude. But there are obviously people who do get there other ways, and there are obviously people who are non-believers who don't get there at all. Atheism is not a synonym for rationality.
Not at all. It does not.
That is such a lie.
Right.
Atheists are all perfectly reasonable and rational people all the time, never have
Right.
any kind of thinking problems whatsoever.
So how Sincere and I met is, I alluded a couple of times to the idea that I was kind of rolling around the idea of starting an organization to focus on the issues that we talk about in the podcast and that I talk about in my talks and that, that I write about and that kind of things. And I was kind of overwhelmed at the prospect of all the paperwork and all the, the organizational stuff. And then I just happened to see that the AHA had hired Sincere on to do social justice. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, like, here's some stuff that I've been working on. What do you think? And he said, well, hey, this is, we're starting these new initiatives. Why don't you come be a part of this? And I was like, perfect. Like, that's the perfect arrangement. So let's talk about that for a second. So the American Humanist Association has launched the Black Humanist Alliance, the Feminist Humanist Alliance, and the LGBTQ Humanist Alliance. And important to state as a response to the haters that these are not entirely new initiatives. It's kind of more like a rebranding or a relaunch. So kind of talk about the conversation surrounding those and why, why we think this is an important thing to do.
Yeah, well, the American Humanist Association is involved with critical inquiry and social concern. That is what humanists and humanism is supposed to embody, right? It's supposed to be about human reason and human ethics. Okay, critical inquiry requires that, and it should go without saying that critical thinking isn't limited to critiquing religious belief systems. That
Right.
is not. I don't know why some people are so adamant that that is the case. Even though they don't say it explicitly, they have this mindset where that is the case, and it's not.
Well, their actions and the things that they say pretty much betray that that's where they're at. Yeah.
Yeah, so when we're talking about critical inquiry, it's like when you have people who, they can be humanists and atheists, but then they claim to be rational in one facet of their life, but then when you start talking about issues that disproportionately affect other groups of people, then they resort to victim blaming or denialism or other forms of defensive moves to try
or things like, I'm not racist, so racism doesn't exist. Or I have a black friend, therefore,
Makes perfect sense.
They don't even understand what racism means.
Right.
So many people, when they think of racism, they think of neo-Nazis, they think of Confederate flags, they think of Ku Klux Klan, they think of explicit, overt anger and animosity and hatred, and that's not what racism even means. So this is how I know that these people don't know what they're talking about. But so the AHA is concerned with being more engaged in these type of issues and actually analyzing them and wanting to do something about them. That's where the social concern comes in. So we understand this is the reason why we have feminism, even though really all humanists ought to be feminists when we're talking about what humanist values entails.
I'm actually an egalitarian. I don't think that women are better than men, so I don't like that term.
Right.
It's offensive.
So just how you have feminism that specifically addresses discriminations and oppressions that disproportionately affect women or women presenting people, it's also the case that you need to have ways to engage matters that aren't being discussed in the regular routine, aren't being discussed or in any way, shape, or form being adequately given enough time to actually have honest discussions or do anything real to address those matters. That's why the Black Humanist Alliance and the Feminist Humanist Alliance and the LGBTQ Humanist Alliance was formed. And just as you said, Callie, the LGBTQ Humanist Alliance has been around since 2008. and the Feminist Humanist Alliance, which was previously known as Feminist Caucus, has been around for decades. So when you see all this gnashing of teeth and all these bitter, entitled tears, they don't know what they're talking about, saying, oh, well, now you guys are a bunch of SJWs. You don't know what you're talking about because these things have been around for a while now. And these issues have always been. And matter of fact, if you go back to the first Humanist Manifesto, you could see we actually have regressed a little bit. Because the first Humanist Manifesto, which was put out by the American Humanist Association, they were far more explicit in their dedication to social justice activities. So all these people who are members of AHA or follow AHA and who have a problem with these things, I don't even know why you're associated with AHA because they've always been about these issues.
Right, exactly.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
Something that I've seen a lot of recently in response to this kind of thing, and just more in general with the state of the atheist movement recently, is people saying, that all that humanism and social justice stuff, that's fine, just keep it out of my atheism. That you can do your American Humanist Association and you can do your social justice stuff, but I'm in the atheist movement. I just care about atheism. I don't want to hear about all this other stuff. So why do you think that humanism and these sort of social justice issues belong in the atheist movement? And if so, why? Great interview question, Ari. Awesome. Good job.
When you're talking about atheist activism, these people, it's funny how we use certain terms. And just how when we think of the word or term racism, we have a certain thing in mind. And this is how I know certain people, where their mindset is at. Because when you're talking about social justice, they have a certain thing in their head that they imagine, not realizing that atheist activism is a species of social justice activism. It is, because you're combating.
This is such a beautiful point. I'm crying.
It is because you're combating religious hegemony, and you understand and you perceive the fact that religious people, particularly Christians in this nation, are privileged beyond other religious identities, and even more so than atheists. So you want what? What do you want? You want justice and you want fairness, separation of church and state. What do you think that is? You can use any type of word salad you want. What it comes down to is you want social justice for your best interests, for your life, for your personhood. You want to gain agency.
That talking point every day.
So this is why I know that these people, you have there's a certain mindset that they have, and there's a certain ideal that they have in the head when they're talking about social justice. If they're not about social justice, then why are they in the atheist movement? Because it's a species of social justice work, whether you like to admit it or not.
No, I agree completely. One of the best quotes that I've ever seen is, normally I hate Twitter because you can't express something that well in 140 characters. The only time in my life I've seen a Twitter post that I was like, that pretty much gets it all.
I like pizza.
Someone said, yes, all lives matter, but until my life matters as much as yours, I'm going to be specific.
There you go.
And I'm just thinking to myself, like, wow, there's really no nuance that statement doesn't cover. That's literally what it's about. The way that I see it is, we were kind of saying in the last segment, I kind of see humanism as an umbrella term. We talk about, when we're talking about LGBTQ issues, we talk about the word transgender being an umbrella term that covers a spectrum of identities that can mean a lot of different things. It's a very broad category. And I see humanism in that way. We call ourselves humanists, and based on what our passions are, what our talents are, what means the most to us, we then get a little more specific. We say, like, okay, I call myself a feminist because I understand that misogyny is a problem. I call myself an ally to people of color because I understand that racism is a problem, and so on and so forth down the line. And the problem is we can't address these things unless we name them. If I was saying in the last segment, if I go to a doctor and ask for hormones because I'm trans, and they say no because they don't agree with me being trans, me saying, well, I'm just a person, that's not an argument. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything. We have to give names to these things. And that's why I think it's so ridiculous that people are reacting so strongly to this. Which leads me into that. You wrote a fantastic post rebutting some of this criticism. And so let's just talk about that for a second. I know you've got some stuff pulled up that you want to read, and I'm really, really eager to hear this.
Yeah, so of course, when the new announcement was made a couple weeks ago now, the press release talking about the relaunch of these initiatives, of course, there was a lot of salt throwing by people who don't want to be bothered by issues that don't directly affect their lives. And so I was looking at this, and I usually, to me, I think, to a certain extent, for the most part, I think it's just humorous to me. I mean, not going to hurt my feelings with words, but I mean, that's just me personally. I know that's not with everyone. But so I was looking at all the vitriol, all the misunderstanding, like gross disinformation when it comes to
willful misunderstanding too. It's not just, it's just not lack of knowing. It's lack of wanting to know.
It's in curiosity. And so I'm looking at these responses, and at first, the only reason why I knew about it was because someone was talking to me. He's like, have you seen all those responses? Like, I was kind of out of loop because I actually have work to do. I'm not, I'm not concerned about the little buzzing of bees.
You mean you're not a keyboard warrior?
Yeah. So I started looking at these responses, and I'm like, oh, okay, well. And so then I decided to actually write out a little bit of a response to some of the things that a lot of responses were saying the same thing. So I kind of put my argument to satisfy some of the main objections that I was saying. And so, if you didn't mind,
oh, please do.
Yes,
so one of the issues, I'll just read 3 tweets back to back. So you have one tweeter say, humanism is supposed to be all-inclusive. So why exactly are we segregating? ? Another one says, humanism encompasses all people. Why make special groups within he says within humanity? ? Another one says, let's just segregate a movement meant to bring everyone under one banner. He's supposed to be sarcastic. That's supposed to be funny. We're supposed to laugh.
Right, yeah. I'm laughing on the inside.
Yeah. So I see these things, and it's both, to me, it's funny, but also infuriating that you have these people who claim to be about, when you say you're a humanist, you're about people. You're about placing a concern for other people actually at the forefront of your values. And so when I see responses like this, it's disappointing. But one thing when it comes to segregation and divisiveness and these types of things that these people claim that we're doing, what we have to remember is this nation has always enforced complex systems of segregation that marginalize this group of people based on various forms of caste, whether it be class, gender, race, sexuality, sexual orientation, so on and so forth. Comprehensive discrimination continues to target women or women-presenting people, blacks, LGBTQ people, and various other disabled people. And you could go on down the line. And these things have always existed. So much like the statement, we are all Africans, just because you profess, don't get me started, just because you profess to stand in unity with respects to an idea such as humanism doesn't magically abolish the underlying biases that inform widely accepted views, values, and beliefs that give rise to such shallow platitudes. Oh, well, we're supposed to all be in this together. You say that, but then what are you doing? So it's like people say these things and they take issue of what we're trying to do. And I think obviously they misunderstand, but it's not like these are adjunct groups of what the American Humanist Association is trying to accomplish. Because we know that specifically addressing these issues and being more focused on them is how we bring in more people and how we can better create change in general, overall. And so when I hear people say these things, it just shows me that they don't really have a concern for these issues.
Well, right. And to me, it's obvious to me, and I think it's obvious to all of us because that's why we're here. But, it just seems so silly to me that people don't realize, like, okay, well, these are a separate set of problems that we're trying to solve, right? They do fall under a broad umbrella, right? We're all intersectional. We understand that there are axes of oppression and that, these issues do have to do with one another. But there are specific problems to be solved, right? We're not going to solve racism solely by focusing on misogyny. You know what I mean? These things are discrete problems with discrete solutions that need discrete action taken to solve them, right? And there are connections, right? But we understand that there are separate actions that need to be taken to address these problems because they are separate problems. And I don't understand why that's not just obvious to people. And maybe I do. Maybe it's just privilege. Like basically everything is privilege.
Actually, I said this. I said it on the panel earlier when we're talking about why certain people just don't get it or choose to not get it, whether it be whether they're naive or they're just willfully just unconcerned. What you just said, our worldviews are influenced by our social positions within society. So these positions allow us to recognize and appreciate some social dynamics. Like we can see atheists, they're all on when you talk about religious privilege, how they can be prejudiced against atheists or so on and so forth, or religious oppression. They're on that. They get that. But at the same time, you can see that. But due to your social position, while you can see that, it may also be the case that your social position obscures your emotional and intellectual connection to other social realities, either partially or entirely. So everyone sees the world through lenses or filters. So it's all about broadening our worldview, our outlook. So what happens is when these people are talking about, I just don't see, all you're doing is broadcasting the level to which various modes of inequality do and don't affect you personally. That's all you're saying. It's not saying, you're not making any factual statements about whether or not this thing exists. What you're telling me is that you don't see it due to your social position.
Yeah. Well, and I think, cognitive bias plays a role here because I think, something that happens often in social justice circles that I 100% understand but don't necessarily agree with is the blanket demonizing of people who hold these positions, because there are so many of these people who do have genuinely good intentions. They just don't know any better. And their cognitive biases prevent them from listening, because everyone has cognitive bias, whether we want to believe it or not. No one is immune to that, and I think it does a disservice to our efforts to solve the problem if we don't honestly confront the fact that, not everyone who has problematic positions is actually malicious, and so I mean, you're right. I mean, it's about the way that these things do and don't affect people. It's, I've figured out the religion thing, and in my mind, religion is the source of all ill in the world. So I've now removed myself of all the ill that I had now that I've left religion behind. So I can't possibly be racist. I can't possibly be misogynist because I see everyone as equal. Like, I don't see race. I don't see gender. Like, right, just going down the line of the bingo card, right? Let's talk about, So let's talk about the specific things that these initiatives are kind of doing to try and address these problems. So the ideas that I came to you with for the LGBTQ Humanist Alliance were things like maybe an online support group for non-believers who are LGBTQ who don't feel necessarily accepted in their communities or comfortable in their communities because they're non-religious. So giving those folks, maybe doing like a Google Hangout every month or something like that. Pulling resources to find competent therapists who are secular, pulling resources, connecting people together, those kind of things. So I'm kind of familiar with that. Are there specific initiatives that have been discussed, like with the Black Humanist Alliance, with the Feminist Humanist Alliance, along those lines, and kind of like what that is actually going to look like on a practical level, or is it too new to have that stuff fleshed out, or where's that whole thing?
So the two main, I'm going to make it as brief as possible. The two main objectives of each of the groups is going to be very similar in that, first, we are trying to initiate cultural and social justice competency within secular spaces. That's what the goal is of all three. And so that's going to involve speaking engagements. That's going to involve something that we are going, what you already proposed, but we're going to have a program that is specifically tailored. Basically, the AHA, make it as simple as possible, the AHA is creating a program right now, it's already in the works, it resembles TED Talks. And it's going to be specifically about these issues that disproportionately affect these groups, people of color, LGBTQ people, and women, or women presenting people. It's going to be like TED Talks, and they're going to be available both. There's going to be two types of programs. One facet, I can't even speak today. One facet of this TED Talk type program we have going on is going to be specifically for AHA chapters. It's going to be available specifically for them, as well as another species of this same program is going to be available through the Humanist Institute. So we've already started getting the ball rolling on that, and that's going to be available real soon. And trust me.
What is the Humanist Institute, real quick?
The Humanist Institute is also an affiliate program of the American Humanist Association. How you become humanist celebrants, you go through the Humanist Institute.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So it's going to be really awesome. It's going to be exciting. And as soon as it's ready, you'll know. I know Callie's going to tell everyone because you're going to be a part of it.
Yep, absolutely.
Right, so that's one goal. The second goal is becoming more socially active, because humanism must be more than just abstract theory or sitting in the armchair thinking to yourself about this philosophy, merely referencing it without actually expressing your humanist values in your daily living and actually being more socially engaged about the world and people like you say that you do. So we're partnering with organizations that are on the ground, that are involved in various types of activism through communities. And we have, I don't want to waste time going down the line, but basically, and some of the programs are going to be, so I'll give you one example. Showing Up for Racial Justice. That's a national network of mobilizing and educating white people about racial justice and issues concerning race. And so all three groups are going to be involved in their Super Volunteers program that will address those types of issues on a broad spectrum. But also, more specifically, you have issues, or you have groups like, for the LGBTQ Humanist Alliance, we've partnered with Get Equal. I don't know if you've heard of them, but you can check them out. I think it's getequal.org, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the description under the episode.
Then also you have the Lionheart Foundation, because the Black Humanist Alliance is going to be involved more with restorative justice. We've partnered with Lionheart Foundation, and they offer evidence-based social and emotional learning programs for incarcerated adults, at-risk youth, and teen parents. And so those type of programs. And then also another organization called Women Thrive for the Feminist Humanist Alliance, but also we can also...
Right, it all sort of intersects in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so they obviously, they're actually an international organization, but they deal with violence, poverty, and other forms of inequality that disproportionately affect women or women presenting people. Mm-hmm. So we're basically trying to prove our humanism in the pudding. We're trying to actually, and we want to have, just how you've probably heard the mantra, normalize atheism, we want to normalize humanism. We want to show people, we want to put a more explicit humanist face on these type of issues. So when we have a co-chair of the Black Humanist Alliance, Ashton Woods, he is unapologetic atheist, out gay, HIV positive activist. He is involved in anything you can think of. He has his hand in it. And so what I love about him is he's involved with the Black Lives Matter movement in Houston. And so when I say he's unapologetically atheist. He'll go to these events, and sometimes you have some groups that want to start off whatever they're about to do with a prayer, and he'll say, "No, we're not doing that. We can have a moment of silence, but no, I'm an atheist. We're not doing that." So, but they know that he's there and he's about business and he's about getting these issues done. But you don't need a God to do that,
right?
So,
yeah, well, and I think that's important because I think a lot of times what we try to do is we just try to start our own thing and do our own thing that's separate from work that's already going on. And not to say that can't be good and that's not important, but I also think it's important for us as secular people to get involved in the broader conversation and step up and claim our space in these movements. I don't have to create necessarily a separate LGBTQ movement for secular people. I can claim my place as part of the broader community. Roughly half of the queer and trans community identifies as non-religious. We belong in those spaces as much as anyone else does. So we can do our own thing like we do with the podcast and with the talking and all that kind of stuff that we do.
The talking.
But the talking, yeah.
The ducking and the writing and the
and all the things. But we also need to exist in the broader spaces where these conversations are happening, where we're not just preaching to the choir about secularism, and we can be unapologetic that no, I don't believe in a God, and this is still important to me. And I mean, I think that's important, like you said, normalizing the idea, because so many people think the person of faith is the default, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, they certainly are the majority, but they're definitely not the default. And so the idea that you can be secular, that you can be atheist and be passionate about social justice, it's still a really foreign thing to so many people, I think. So that's why I'm so excited to be involved in this, and I'm really, really stoked on what we're going to accomplish together. So the last question that I have, one of the things that I hear so much from people is that I really want to help, but I don't know what to do, or I feel like what I do isn't enough.
When it comes to what? When they say
just activism in general. I've identified this thing that I care about, this cause that matters to me. I've identified a problem that I want to help solve, but I don't know how to do it, or I don't feel like what I'm doing is adequate. What is your response to that? I mean, so obviously, an organization needs money. An organization needs volunteer time, right? Those things are obvious. But if someone, say, isn't in a position to come to conferences and give talks and buy audio equipment to do a podcast, those kind of things, what are some of the more practical things that you think people can do to make a difference and to affect change?
Well, I would say that get involved on a local level, and then also it depends on what the issue is. So if you're, let's say you have a more healthy understanding of how all-encompassing racism is, and you want to do something about it, right? You want to be an activist for change. Seek out those who are involved in anti-racist work, or organizations involved in those kinds of things, and ask them. It's not that difficult. When you're talking about you want to do something that helps certain communities, whether it be homeless people, whether it be trans people, whether it be any type of issue that involves marginalized people, there's always a resource available to us. So I would say search locally, but also seek out, there's a myriad of organizations dedicated to just about any issue that we're concerned with. And that's how the AHA got involved with certain organizations, partnering with them, because we sought out, we're thinking, okay, now we want to get more involved in restorative justice. What do we do? And that's how I found Lionheart Foundation. If we want to get involved in racial justice, if you want to get more involved in gender justice, what do? So you look up certain specific issues that you want to get involved with, and you find the right context, and you go from there.
Yeah. What I always try to remind people of, that the root word of activism is act, right? If you're not sitting on your couch watching TV, you're taking action, right? And that can look like a lot of different things. I think people get the idea that activism looks like holding a protest sign in front of city council, or speaking at a convention in front of hundreds of people. And those things are activism, right? But that's not what all of that encompasses.
Yeah.
I mean, I bristle when people denigrate the idea of like having conversations on Facebook as being useless, because it's not useless. I've talked to people who have actually changed their mind because I sat down to have a conversation with them on Facebook, and probably 80 to 90% of the time when you attempt to have these conversations, you're not going to change somebody's mind, because there are plenty of people who they're just not going to be that way. But you can still affect change by doing that, So I always just try to encourage people, like, even the littlest stuff matters. Like, as long as as long as you're actually, like, you're trying to be better and you're aware of those things, you're aware of what privileges you have and how those can be directed in service of those things. Even the smallest things really can make a difference, because I always think, like, there are so few people, as a percentage, so few people who are involved in activist work. I mean, imagine if everyone did something as simple as engaging in a conversation with a family member about a problematic thing they said about race or about gender, and that doesn't even mean like, attacking someone or tearing them down, but just existing visibly as the opposition, right? Saying like, no, like, I'm not gonna let that comment pass. I'm gonna at least let you know that I disagree with you, because I'm not gonna let you be comfortable in thinking that this way of thinking is the default. Mm-hmm. And it can be something as simple as that. Like, that's all activism to me, and it's all important.
And I think even on an individual level, even something as simple as just being there for a friend who's experiencing these kind of issues that these initiatives are trying to address, I consider that activism as well.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and that's the thing, because what we're fighting against is the idea that people don't want us to thrive, don't want us to exist, don't want us to survive. So in a lot of ways, just doing that is activism. That's why I try to, people ask sometimes, like, what do you do when you're feeling like you're burnt out because you feel guilty for stepping back from activism and taking a break? And I'm like, look, like, you're part of what you are fighting for. You know what I mean? Taking care of yourself is activism.
Absolutely. Like, just existing as a person in this system is an act of subversion sometimes. Right.
So yeah, that's awesome. Well, Sincere, thank you so much for coming on the show, for taking the time. I know you've been
sincerely thank you.
Oh,
you
God,
it's always one. I
cannot believe you went there.
Always
My
one.
God.
Every single time.
Yeah, well, when your last name is Wright, like, anyways.
Sorry, guys. I had to do it.
Sideways stare at Ari. But, I know it's been a super, super busy weekend for you, so I definitely appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, and more broadly, what you're doing with the AHA and with the movement. So it's sincere. Jesus Christ. I almost said it, like, not even as a joke, because I say, like, oh yeah, I sincerely appreciate that. Like, I say it as, like, wasn't making the joke.
He's over there smiling, but it's like an evil, like, I'm about to kill you smile.
God, I'm a terrible person too, apparently.
Clearly.
Sincere is the only person in the room that's not a terrible person right now.
It's all contagious, right. Get out.
Well, in all seriousness, thank you for everything that you're doing and for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
One thing I want to mention before we wrap the episode up here is that one of the projects that we're going to start doing as part of the LGBTQ Humanist Alliance is going to be a pretty regular conference call where we invite members of the community to call in, so we can just have conversations about doing this activism and what we can do to create connections and to make things better. So the first one of those is actually going to be June 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern. I don't have the call-in number yet. Keep an eye on social media for that, and I'll should be able. Yeah, I'll put it in the next episode when we're doing stories from the Reason Rally. I'll have that information, but just be aware, if that's something that you're interested in. You don't necessarily have to identify as LGBTQ. If you're an ally, you're absolutely welcome. We want to hear input from all different people about what we can be doing to further these goals. So again, that's going to be June 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'd love to hear from you. Also, we are going to be at the Reason Rally. Ari and I both will be there along with a whole bunch of other people. It's going to be an amazing time. I'm really, really excited. And what we're trying to do with that, as I said in the last episode, I don't know. I don't want to just like sit around and have a discussion. Here's what happened in DC last weekend. And what I'd really like to do is use the opportunity to meet new people and hear stories and hear about, people's journeys. And so, if you have a story that you want to tell in person about coming out, about overcoming adversity, about, your own personal journey, I would love to hear from you, and I would love to hear your story and amplify your voice, so you can be heard. So, we'll be around, tweet at us at The Gatheists, shoot me an email, thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. We want to meet up with as many people as possible. We want to hear stories. We want to give hugs and all that kind of stuff. So please reach out if that's something you're interested in. We would love to meet you. But not Ari, because Ari's an awful person. And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. I want to thank Sincere Karaba for his time and for the conversation and for the work that he's doing. And I want to thank my co-host, Ari.
Aww,
thanks.
It's been so fun hanging out this weekend.
Yeah, because we're actually hanging out in person as opposed to via Skype, because that's fun. But yeah, it's cool. It's fun being together. So you can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at Gaytheist Callie, and Ari is going to make us all hate them.
So, welcome back to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We're here with our contestant, Callie Wright, who is 2 questions away from hitting the $1 million prize. Callie, are you ready? And remember that you do have your poll the audience option available for these next 2 questions.
Okay.
All right. Your next question is, on which of these websites can you find and friend Ari Stillman in order to talk to them? A, FetLife. B, JDate. C, Facebook. Or D, Farmers Only.
I'm going to go with A, final answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, Callie. That is incorrect. The correct answer was C, Facebook. But since you've been such a good sport, and also we have to put this information out there,
I was just going to say, you can't ask me the second question now because I'm out.
You're terrible at improv. You're like the person that comes in with a machine gun and starts shooting people. Okay.
Whoa.
No, in improv.
Whoa.
In improv.
Talk
to Eli about it. He'll tell you.
That got really aggressive
that's
all of a sudden.
No, in improv, not in real. Okay. And your final question to win the $1 million is, which of these email addresses is the email at which you can contact Ari Stillman to leave your questions and suggestions and comments? Is it A, bunnieseverywhere@yahoo.com? Is it B, aristillman4@gmail.com? Is it C, #1 best person ever yay @hotmail.com? Or is it D, I can't think of anything else because I didn't write this down, at AOL.com?
I'm going with AOL.com.
Just AOL.com?
Yeah. We can email you at
That is
AOL.com.
correct. You can email me at AOL.com. I'm sorry. It's actually aristillman4@gmail.com. Thanks for playing. You get nothing. We'll see you guys next time here on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Oh, man. It just gets
so
worse
much
and
time with
worse
this.
every time.
This is what happens when I'm driving up here and I'm like, oh, crap.
You got a couple hours to kill. What am I
going
going to do with this? I'm just going to make it as awful as I possibly can. God. So if you want to support the show, support the activism that we do, you can head to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto, make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. It really does make a difference. That's the only reason I'm going to be able to make it to the Reason Rally next weekend. So really, really excited about that. Definitely grateful to the folks who help us out with that. If financial support isn't in the cards, money's tight. I get that. It's tight for me too. You can go to you can go to
What's
iTunes.
that website again?
Yeah, .com. You can go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review, help us move up in the rankings. That helps us get heard by more people and helps grow what we do. And we sincerely appreciate it. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, If you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gay Theist Manifesto.